Welcome to episode number 10 of the LSR Podcast. My name is Matt Brown, joined each and every week by the brightest minds in all of the gambling industry. On this bright, sunny Thursday in May, I have with me Eric Ramsey, I have Dustin Gowker, and I have a grumpy Adam Candy, and we are here to talk about some very interesting topics this week. We don't have a ton of news to share with you, but man, the news we do have to share is big stuff in this great industry of ours. Of course, we are on iTunes, we are on Spotify, we are on Stitcher. If you want to follow us on the Twitter machine at LSP Report, please do that. Please leave us 5-star reviews and please leave us all of the great comments because we are trying to climb up the little charts there. More people find this podcast and more people become educated on this awesome topic that we continue to talk about here. All right, let's start off with a state here that is going to have some sports betting. Montana, their governor comes out and said that he spent a great deal of time considering the pros and cons of the two different systems that they were weighing on there, Adam, but he ended up choosing one over the other, and we will at least have some form of sports betting in Montana.
I'm trying to imagine at the beginning of this year, if we had done the pod in January, where we would have ranked Montana if we had said which state is going to legalize first in 2019. And Montana actually won that race, passed two sports betting bills. Governor Steve Bullock ultimately decided to sign the one that runs through the lottery. So you'll have a model right down to the provider that looks a lot like the situation in Washington, D.C., as Intralot will be at the front of this. There was also a model out there which would have put sports betting into taverns across Montana. That's where gaming is set up in the first place. That would have been potentially a multi-operator model. That did not make it through. He ultimately said that he is willing to revisit the idea of that model in a couple of years, but that the governor prefers to start out conservatively and just have one model and make sure that it rolls out in a good way. So that's the plan for Montana. And again, I'm blown away by the fact that Montana was first this year.
A direct quote from the governor there that said, ultimately, however, the lottery model makes more sense for Montana. He says that protects sports wagering products and players through security and integrity protocols, policies, and around responsible gambling, and policies to ensure that sports wagering is competitive, transparent, and reliable. Now, he goes on to say that, like the private model, the lottery model protects the taxpayers from risk, but the lottery model builds on an existing infrastructure and is projected to return significantly more revenue to taxpayers. By contrast, the private model could risk favoring market entrants into the market entrants with the most resources to advertise and promote their products. So, Dustin, I mean, that's kind of a very veiled little pot shot, if you will, at DraftKings and FanDuel, if you kind of read between the lines right there, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is what the dynamic we've been talking about on this podcast all year is that lotteries, when they have the opportunity to have a monopoly, they're trying to take it right now. So it's a part of the dynamic everywhere. We're going to see how it pans out. I think we obviously think that if you don't have an open model with multiple brands competing, trying to push each other and make each other better, if you don't do enough marketing, the lottery model alone is not always going to do very well. So and Montana, again, small state. This is not going to be online roll out, but we'll have to see where it all spans out. But DraftKings, FanDuel, and other online only operators are definitely kind of in the radar of lotteries and some folks in other states.
Eric, we do have a state that is a little bit bigger here in Indiana that we will look like we are going to have some sports betting here.
A little bit bigger and a little better law in Indiana. And yeah, this one is also law. As of Wednesday, Governor Eric Holcomb signed this bill into law. This is a good bill. It's statewide mobile for the casinos. The license fee is $100K initially and then $50K annually. Reasonable tax rate of 9.5%. Some money goes to problem gambling. There are provisions in this bill that would allow the Gaming Commission to impose certain bet restrictions and limitations on the data sources, but those will be up to the commission. So as passed, this bill looks pretty good, and Indiana is officially on the road to sports betting with a law on the books.
No wagering on eSports or amateur athletes under the age of 18. That is perfectly fine. Nobody wants to wager on middle school basketball. And we've talked about eSports a couple of different times here, Dustin. This is certainly something that you've looked at on several occasions. I think a lot of people, as you guys listen to these hearings, you understand just how much of this industry that maybe everybody doesn't totally get. And then you try to throw in the esports wrinkle and you start to really realize that maybe that's just an area that maybe people don't want to have to deal with right off the bat when it comes to trying to legalize these things.
Yeah, esports lawmakers have enough hard time wrapping their head around sports betting and online gambling and all that. So they just want to stay away from esports, which is even scarier. So yeah, you're going to see people trend towards that. I mean, it's interesting that they're even getting that language directly in bills, not dealing with it via regulation. So, but yeah, esports equals scary for lawmakers, so they're staying away from it. Also, Adam notified me privately that I was wrong. There is going to be mobile in Montana. This shows the pace of bills. I just can't keep them all straight.
In Indiana, there are some limits on in-play betting that will come into play there. The governor that Eric mentioned, Eric Holcomb, gaming is a highly regulated industry that once had little competition, but now does from surrounding states and new technology. By modernizing our laws, this legislation will spur positive economic growth for our state and for an industry that employs over 11,000 Hoosiers. Additionally, it will bring new revenue and create hundreds of new jobs, both permanent and in construction. Now, Adam, when we talked about this bill last week, the thought was that he was not going to sign this bill. He was just going to let it become law. Instead, right here at kind of the last hour, he decided to go ahead, slap his signature on it, and then release a statement here where it really focuses on the jobs, the job growth, and what it's doing for creating, for the economy, not necessarily from the tax revenue aspect of it, but from jobs and whatnot. Is that really what changed here? Is that why he wanted to get his name on this thing? Because he wanted to say, hey, I'm providing jobs here for this state?
I'm going to have to, unfortunately, notify you publicly the way I just notified Dustin privately that I think we're crossing up Tennessee and Indiana when we think about the governor letting the bill go without signing it. The last we had out of Indiana from Eric Holcomb was that he was still evaluating it, but that we did not have an indication that he was necessarily against the bill. And the thing to keep in mind with the Indiana bill is that this is not really necessarily a sports betting bill. This is a much, much larger gaming overhaul bill. It involves the movement of casinos. This was something that overall, this bill was something that required the industry to come together in a lot of what were ultimately fragile ways. This bill navigated a very interesting path. Mobile betting had been stripped out of the overall bill at one point because one of the House committee chairs was opposed. He ended up giving quite the interesting floor statement, being mad that it was thrown back into the bill, although that probably was the plan all along among some of the folks who were favoring mobile. So ultimately, I don't think the governor really was doing much of a reverse of course in Indiana. I think there were way too many interests involved here for him to reject the bill or to just let it go on by. Like you said, there were jobs interests, and there were multiple communities here, including Gary, Terre Haute, others who were interested in seeing this bill go through for reasons beyond sports betting.
All right, Eric, we do have a couple of other bills that are at the finish line here. Tell us a little bit about Iowa and Tennessee.
Yeah, last week I think we were waiting for 4 to be signed, and we've ticked 2 of those off the list. Now we have Iowa is up next. The governor there has 30 days to sign the bill that the legislature has passed. We actually just saw an update before we recorded here Thursday morning that the governor has signed a sort of companion bill that modifies some of the provisions, which would seem to indicate that maybe we're going to get a signature on the main bill as well. This is another pretty good bill. Licenses are $45,000 a piece. The tax rate is 6.75%. Again, mobile wagering throughout the state. The little sticking point here is in-person registration until the start of 2021. But other than that, this looks pretty good. We think the governor will sign, but this is the one that may be in the most jeopardy. The governor, Kim Reynolds, there has sort of been weighing public opinion, which is lukewarm for sports betting, and her decision is not certain. But again, yeah, that little sidecar bill got signed today, so maybe some encouraging news.
And then in Tennessee, it seems as if Dustin, seems like this is the bill that we hit on a little bit last week or something, but it's there, but it's not something we're jumping up and down about.
Yeah, another bill that, if we were to create a perfect bill, this would not be the perfect bill. Has a lot of stuff in it that I don't think is great for the market. But it does have mobile wagering. When we can't be totally choosy when we're seeing bills passed, I think. But Tennessee, I wouldn't quite call it a Frankenstein bill, I don't think, but it is maybe not the best bill we've ever seen.
So when we have a bunch of people who are talking about, Eric, this is what you do. We understand this is what you do with the map here. We saw like 5 different numbers yesterday. People come out and like, it's legal in X amount of states. It's legal. What number are we talking about here? I know Dustin took a definitive line in the sand on this as well yesterday on the Twitter machine, but let's go ahead and for once and for all put it out there. What's the number we're actually talking about here?
Yeah, so it gets a little weird. Obviously, Nevada predates all of this, so that's one, which some people forget about. And New Mexico makes things a little weird because they haven't passed a law, but there are tribes operating sports betting in New Mexico. Indiana is the 10th. I don't know. It's really hard to say. We currently have 8 states with sports betting, and we've just added Indiana and Montana to the list. So if both of these were live today, we would have 10 states with sports betting.
Okay, so yeah, I've seen numbers as high as people saying that 64 states have already legalized it. So I was just making sure that we have that kind of thrown out there with everything. Now, Adam, yesterday evening, a letter was presented by the Jets, the Giants, and the Bills that they put out a joint letter. And basically, we're talking about what they would like to see in New York. Now, one of the things that they put in there that was kind of interesting that we were talking about in Slack a little bit before we got on this podcast was the fact that they actually wrote out that they were going after, really wanted to see the illegal market taken care of there, which was, again, from teams, which really doesn't have, we haven't really seen teams come out and speak out against this or something, but it was a major part of this letter that they submitted.
What's interesting, not just from the perspective of the Jets, Giants, and Bills, but from the NFL overall, is that the NFL really has not joined in with any of the rest of the party from the NBA, NHL, Major League Baseball. Really, the NBA and Major League Baseball have kind of been on their own thing. NHL's largely sat back, and NFL and its teams have been taking a different tack to all of this. They haven't gone after integrity fees. They have gone after federal sports betting legislation, and that's where, to me, this ultimately fits in with what we've seen from the NFL is that, the idea within that federal sports betting legislation of dealing with the illegal market was there. I mean, it really was the strongest part of that bill, the best part of the proposed federal sports betting legislation that we saw pop up a few months ago. So to hear the professional teams in New York backing that idea, that doesn't shock me just because of that.
Now, Eric, this is your territory here, obviously over there in New York. You listened to a hearing yesterday with all of this. Of course, that letter came after the hearing. I think it was them just kind of summarizing their thoughts here. But what came out of what you heard yesterday?
Yeah, that was their written testimony they submitted, and there is a long list of written testimony, maybe 25 or 30 files long on the page for this hearing. Yeah, I was in Albany yesterday for this hearing in the Senate committee. Senator Joseph Addabbo is both the sponsor of the bill and the chairman of the committee. It was a really good hearing. It was, 5 or 6 hours long and pretty much drew testimony from all corners of the industry, the horse racing tracks, the online operators, the in-state casinos, problem gambling interests. I left that hearing with feeling pretty pessimistic about the chances for mobile betting this year. Again, everyone was in the room and sort of hammering out the details, but there is a long way to go. Addabbo sort of setting the stage for next year, talking about getting the assembly on board and sort of setting the conversation on a better path into next year. So it was productive. It was mostly good, but just really doesn't look very favorable this year.
Dustin, in that letter from those three NFL teams there in New York, one of the things that they brought up as well is your favorite deal, where they were talking about how they needed everybody to have official league data, because if you don't, there is absolutely no way that you can ensure integrity.
Yeah, that's not true. So, go ahead.
I saw the word ghost games in this testimony, and
Yes.
they lost me right there. We've seen this
that.
a couple times. We're still talking about ghost games in public testimony.
Yeah, ghost games are like fake games created just so you can bet on them, and this is not a thing. This is like, there have been examples. This is not a thing in regulated U.S. markets. This is all the boogeyman. You don't need official data to do pregame, single game wagers. You do probably need. You need good data to do in-play wagering, but does it have to be "quote unquote" official data? And does that need to be legislated? Obviously the answer from all of us is no. This is again something that should be handled commercially, something that we've seen them try to do commercially, and some have and are going to do that. But to legislate that you need to do official data, that you have to go through somebody that is rubber stamped by the leagues is kind of silly, and I think it's counterproductive to the market.
And Adam, finally, what's going on in Illinois? I know we were very high on the I states there for a while. It seems like we are souring just a tad on Illinois.
Illinois just can't seem to pull it together again. Yesterday, a couple of amendments appeared that replaced the group of 5 amendments that proposed amendments that had been thrown out there. And boy, they are a weird set of amendments. There's one that still looks to punish DraftKings and FanDuel. There's some bad actor language in there that would restrict them for about 3 years. One of the other bills is a mess of license fees where, there are some entities that could end up having to pay north of $20 million, up to $25 million for a license to get into sports betting. The original request from Governor J.B. Pritzker was for $10 million licenses, looking to get at least 20 of them, $200 million raised up front. And that still looked steep, but at least that matched what we'd seen in Pennsylvania. Now we're seeing that license could go as high as $15 million. I don't know. In Illinois, not only are we talking about sports betting, but in large part, we're talking about larger gaming bills as well. What we've seen overall, the larger the state, the larger the market opportunity, the more interests, the more stakeholders, the less chance of getting something done cleanly.
This is going to be our lives for the next 5 years, guys. So just know that. Maybe at least y'all's lives. I can sit here and I get to talk to you guys about it, and you can paint the picture for me, and you can give me the cliff notes and all of that. But this is your lives for the next 5 years. How do you feel about that?
We might still be doing this in Illinois 5 years from now if the recent movements are any indication.
Maybe we'll start in California by then. That would be great.
Yeah, we could get. Yeah, if we think that we're having some back and forth and ups and downs and all of that, I can't wait until California gets into the mix here.
If we're talking about California, then we're going to start talking about states with huge tribal interests. And you think it's complicated now? Wait till we do that.
It is going to be something else. Now, guys, let's get to this main topic here, and something we'll probably spend a nice little amount of time talking about here is a big announcement that came out yesterday between Fox Sports, and the Stars Group. Dustin, you have a nice, long, very thought out article over at Legal Sports Report right now. So can you let's give the cliff notes at least of the deal.
Yeah, if you don't know, and you might be living under a rock, or you probably don't listen to this podcast already if you weren't aware that this happened yesterday, but Fox Sports and the Stars Group, owner of PokerStars and a worldwide gambling company that has a foothold in New Jersey, they signed a partnership to launch Fox Bet in real sports money as a real sports money wagering product in the United States, alongside free-to-play contests. Obviously, this has pretty huge ramifications for one, 1, sports, 2, media, 3, the gambling industry. This is the first real serious foray by one of the major sports media companies to go through. Obviously, we already had the score in the space, but Fox, this is a little bit more than dipping a toe in the water. They're launching an actual real money app. We're going to see in New Jersey first. It's going to BetStars brand is going to change to Fox Bet, and yeah, this brings up a lot of questions, a lot of you could talk a lot about what this means for the future of sports betting and sports media, and as this is the first real indication of what we're going to try to see, from media companies as they get into the betting space moving forward.
So it looks like this is a 25-year overall deal. It is 5% for $236 million. They can acquire up to 50% of the U.S. operations over the next 10 years, so they choose to do so. And also, it seems like there's a provision in the deal where the Stars Group has agreed to a minimum annual ad spend with Fox as well, so they'll get some of the money back here that they have spent by getting some ad deals with the Stars Group and whatnot. Now, Adam, this is not our first media company, but certainly the biggest here. We did see the Score they're not officially in the market yet, but we know that they have a deal, and we know that they plan on launching in several places here. But Fox is Fox, obviously. They have the NFL. They have Major League Baseball. They've got the 2020 Super Bowl here. I mean, are we going to be seeing Fox Bet on broadcasts as soon as this fall, as soon as when people are tuning in on Sundays to watch their NFL games?
Oh, I would think that Fox is not going to waste any time in promoting this brand. Obviously, it's a huge investment by Fox. You just mentioned a number of the broadcast rights they hold. So now we're going to start getting into the inevitable, but seriously, we're doing it now conversation of streaming within gambling apps, because it's right there. It's right there to be had. In terms of, what we expect in the long term with this, you have to realize that with the approach that Fox has taken here, they're basically saying we're legal. You're able to have the real money gambling where legal. And so, you're looking at a piecemeal approach for Fox. I think you're kind of building expectations in a way that this app is going to be available in a lot broader form than it's going to be, at least initially. Now, of course, they have the free-to-play contest on there that will be able to launch anywhere. But at the same time, I think Fox and now working with Stars Group is going to have to become a lot more active lobbying than even they might think they would have had to have been to make this deal really pay off for them in the long run.
So, Eric, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago on the podcast, that we were saying that, one of the things that we didn't, and this was coming on the heels of the announcement that FanDuel was going to be streaming some sports within their app, and we were saying, but it's these smaller sports. It's not really anything we think is going to completely really move the needle here. And then 2 weeks goes by, and holy hell, here we are with this type of deal. And as Adam alluded to, this is real life now. Fox owns these broadcast rights, so this is now real life where we could quite literally see, should the technology catch up to the streaming and whatnot of NFL games and Major League Baseball games streaming right alongside in-play odds, where you can literally, one click a bet or whatever it might be. I mean, what we were talking about 2 weeks ago as being a pipe dream is now very, very, very real.
Yeah, and this is probably the right group to go after it for the first time. Stars Group has a lot of experience doing this sort of thing in the UK with Sky Bet. And the interesting thing, I think Dustin mentioned this in his piece, is those regional sports networks that Fox lost earlier this year to Disney and then Sinclair Group. That seems like a big miss to lose those regional networks. But yeah, they have obviously Lock It In on FS1 seems like a perfect target for integration of this sort of thing. And yeah, their broadcast deals this is huge. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Dustin, with that, this is pretty an interesting move. If you guys are not familiar with the thing that Eric just mentioned right there, I mean, there are several regional sports networks that holds broadcasting rights to various baseball teams, NBA teams, as well as hockey teams. And Fox, up until very recently, was the owner of the majority of those regional sports networks and held some very big broadcasting rights and a ton of different broadcasting rights to a ton of different professional sports teams. Doesn't it makes you wonder how long this deal has been in the works, or if this kind of like came about really rapidly? Because it's almost as if you're Fox and you knew something like this was going to happen, you certainly would have wanted to hold on to those regional sports networks.
Yeah, there's some kind of disconnect here, because this is not the kind of deal that happens overnight. This has also been teased by Stars Group in earnings calls for several quarters that they're working on something pretty big. We knew they were going to rebrand, so this is not like this happened in like a week, and it's too big of a deal to have happened in a week. Fox, I'm sure, is not like snapping its fingers and saying, "Oh, we're going to get into the sports betting industry." This is a measured thing. So, yeah, the regional sports networks to me is a real disconnect, because people keep saying, "Oh, they had to sell them," but the history of this deal goes. This is a little. I don't follow the sports media business as much as I used to, but Fox spun off 21st Century Fox. All of its properties to Disney, and part of that deal that Fox sold was all these regional sports networks, the Fox Sports networks. So it left behind Fox Corp, which is Fox Sports, the Fox News that you see on cable, et cetera, and basically the news and TV radio. But the included in the deal were the RSNs, and then Disney, as part of the deal, were forced to sell it off, and then that just happened this week as well to Sinclair. So these, in a world where sports betting is going to roll out on a state-by-state basis, these would have been extremely valuable properties to try to market, acquire customers. Much easier than doing it through the national channels that have been left behind, Fox Sports 1 and the radio broadcast. So in retrospect, I'm wondering why. Maybe they had to include them in the deal to make Disney want to do the deal. But if they were going into a world with sports betting, not having the Fox Sports networks is a giant miss in my book.
Yeah, it seems like a huge miss. I mean, that was the very first thing when this came through. Yesterday evening, the first thing that came to my mind. I was like, wow, that could have been just a jackpot for these guys. I mean, having all of these broadcast rights and all of these local markets with all of these teams, and then not having that anymore. I mean, even getting people to sign up for your free to play. I mean, Adam, this is one of the things we've talked about before, is even getting these people to sign up for the free to play product before the real money is available. Just getting those people within your network and getting their email addresses and finding and identifying people who are at least willing to use this app and do in-game contests and things like that. I mean, the value of that alone is, I'm not going to say definitively, because that's not my thing to say, is worth billions, but to me it seems like it's worth like $1 billion or something.
If you can convert it, of course, and that really is going to become, and not to go against you in saying that. That you brought up the idea of, you lose the RSNs, you're going with a Stars Group that, frankly, in its rollout in New Jersey has not made anything of an impact. BetStars in New Jersey was really not all that noticeable. Now, when you add the Fox brand on top of it, that certainly gives a lot better look and a lot more opportunity for that to grow, clearly with the platform that Fox has to be able to broadcast out there about it. And think about this also. ESPN, we heard directly a couple of months ago that ESPN does not want to be directly in the gambling game. And I think that Fox now has staked out a true differentiation. And because of that differentiation, they have something that they feel like they're staking all of it on. Not that ESPN won't do gambling content, but in terms of having a hand directly into real money wagering, ESPN has talked about the fact that they don't want that. And of course, Fox, as the plucky little brother that it's been for a long time to a lot of ESPN's programming, is out there trying to find a way to make themselves stand out. So by the time this gets integrated into NFL broadcasts this year and beyond, I think you'll see Fox going as hard after this as it possibly can.
All right, Dustin. So we already mentioned New Jersey, and we know that BetStars is in New Jersey, but where could we see, in theory, where could we see Fox Bet moving forward? Where are there inroads already?
Yeah, so part of the deal is, and they actually mentioned this on the call that I woke up at 4:30 Pacific to listen to, that they have BetStars, Stars Group actually already had a deal in place with Eldorado Resorts, which has casinos kind of all over the country, and some of those intersect with markets that are already live for sports betting. Nevada, obviously, they have casinos in Reno. Stars has a deal in place outside of that with Mount Airy in Pennsylvania. They are planning to deploy in Pennsylvania with online sports betting. Eldorado owns Mountaineer Casino in West Virginia. They have presence in both Indiana and Iowa, which we discussed earlier. They have casinos in several other states where there might be sports betting as well: Ohio, Louisiana, and Colorado. So this lines up pretty well for like a fairly fast rollout. I mean, as fast as it's going to happen in the United States, because you just can't flip the switch and obviously be in a lot of states. So it already done a little bit of the heavy lifting, but this is certainly not going to be the end of the access that Fox seeks. They're going to be looking to aggressively to get into everywhere that has sports betting, because you don't do this kind of deal with just like, we're going to be in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. That's all right. They're going to try to get in everywhere they possibly can.
So, Eric, if people have listened to this podcast and if they are familiar with the work that you guys do at Legal Sports Report, something might be in the back of their brain right now, and they might be saying to themselves, wait a minute, don't I remember Fox being an investor in DraftKings? Doesn't Fox already isn't the Stars Group have other deals already in place or whatever? So this seems like an interesting partnership, to say the least, right?
Yeah, this actually, Dustin mentions, it involves some markets that are on the way to sports betting. It also involves some other deals. This is a big. So Dustin just talked about that partnership with Eldorado. Well, Eldorado actually owns 20% of William Hill US as well. We've heard recent rumors of a possible Caesars Eldorado merger, which would make things super interesting. And yeah, Fox has had equity in DraftKings since 2015. So all of these companies are now part of the same sort of web of partnerships, and it could get interesting.
If your mind is blown about all that, yeah, that's how complicated all this is. It's not like it's real neat and messy. It's neat and compartmentalized. It's a big mess right now in the United States. Is how all this is going to roll out.
So, Adam, let's go back to the Fox Bet brand that we are going to see kind of moving forward with this. Do you feel that, you mentioned BetStars didn't really make much of a dent over there in New Jersey comparatively whenever we look at some of these other companies that have been launched over there. So do you think moving to a Fox brand or getting the Fox brand on board, does this give them a leg up in your mind?
It's definitely a step up from the BetStars brand. Fox is so widely recognized that even if you don't begin with a brand that you immediately associate with sports betting, you begin with a brand that has some level of trust to it, and that is huge. Now, does it put you on the same footing as a DraftKings or a FanDuel that has a direct association in the brand with, we'll say, sports betting if you're not talking about DFS? Yeah, I think I can't think that it puts Fox on that level, but at the same time, I do think that it does step BetStars up into a different level of the discussion when you look at what brands are going to be able to walk into a market and be able to compete immediately. I think the interesting example is a place like Tennessee, where we mentioned that it's going to be really, really difficult to make money in Tennessee. Even the brands that play in Tennessee probably aren't going to be hugely profitable. I would not have put BetStars atop the list of brands where I thought they would have been able to do well in Tennessee. But if you give me the Fox brand in a state that has an NFL team and is going to see these ads consistently, yeah, now you don't have to have the same kind of marketing spend, because all you have to do is put it on the broadcast that you already paid for the rights to have. So in a situation like that, I think that's the sort of vertical integration that could make the Fox Bet brand a lot more profitable in the long run.
So Dustin, from a business standpoint for this, we understand the name of the game here is getting people to sign up and choose you over somebody else. Do you think that this possibly is a big help for them from a customer acquisition standpoint?
Absolutely. I mean, it's expensive to acquire customers in today's day and age, especially online. So it's not having, having ways to do that. Even though, like, the RSNs aside, it would, like, I still think it would have been that would have been great for customer acquisition for them. But you still have, you're gonna have this free to play game, which will allow them to create a database of players in advance of wagering in other states. You have, once you're further out there, you're gonna be able to target to more states, and you can just feed people ads, say, hey, if you're in a state with legal sports betting, try the Fox Bet app. It's these are baked into what they already do. They can do live reads on radio, they can do little promos and pre and post game for you can do this. So this is an advantage that almost nobody else has. Certainly casinos don't have it. The daily fantasy turn sports betting companies don't have this advantage either. This is a pretty unique advantage they can do, and this is what the score is banking on too. They have users that they can already target and say they're already primed. They like sports. You can get them to. They think they can get them to easily convert to an app and start betting. And this is it's a huge advantage from that standpoint that they can convert these sports fans, I think, to sports bettors. And this is what you'll see from other you'll see it in varying forms from others. So I think we look at Yahoo and we think that they're definitely going to be doing something pretty serious on sports betting down the road. If they don't, I don't know what they're doing over there, but this is the path forward for media companies.
Yeah, that's basically where I was going to try and go here to close things out, is where we see this kind of moving forward here. I mean, Eric, we've got obviously the big brands that are still out there. I mean, there's ESPN, there's NBC, there's CBS, there's Dustin just mentioned Yahoo. We already had the Score get involved. Of course, that's a Canadian company, but still a media company nonetheless. It seems as if the writing is on the wall that at some point or another, all of these people will get involved in some way, shape, or form. But if you were handicapping, who do you think would kind of get on in there next?
I think Disney, ESPN may be the least likely among the group of big broadcasters just because of the Disney tie. You never know, but I think that one's probably at the bottom of the list. NBC Sports would probably be the next candidate in my mind. They're already, on the edge of this space. They've started scooping up some domains related to gambling, do some free games and things like that. So I wouldn't be surprised to see someone like NBC Sports go next.
And then, Adam, I mean, I think the obvious thing here, and of course we keep talking about these leagues and we talk down on these leagues because of all the stuff that they continue to ask these states for and whatnot. But I mean, do you see a world in 5 years from now? I just have to believe that the NFL and Major League Baseball and NBA, I just think they're going to get involved directly. It would not shock me in the least bit if there are going to be people betting on the NFL betting app.
I think we're still a step or two away. Obviously, I think we're looking at leagues that don't necessarily want to have it all on their shoulders to have this operated correctly. But at the same time, when you look down the road, it's hard not to say that one of the leagues will eventually jump out there and do this. Gosh, the NFL. That would be a tough one. The NFL seems less likely to me than Major League Baseball and the NBA. Major League Baseball in particular, I think, is going to be out there at some point with this. They just seem way too excited about the idea of what in-play can do for them, and they also seem very interested in having as much control as is humanly possible over how all of this rolls out. So, when we look and start to handicap which leagues might get directly involved, I still think Major League Baseball might be near the top of that list, but I don't know. There's a lot to consider for leagues before they decide whether or not to jump in directly.
You may see a partnership emerge from this with a league. There's some people that are sort of minimizing the free-to-play game. I think that's a huge component of this and something the NBA has already started dabbling in. In the UK with Sky Bet, they have a weekly £250,000 contest that's free to play for picking 6 soccer matches. So, maybe something like that in the US would be the next step, a nationwide NFL pick'em contest for free or something like that.
And if we're talking leagues, I mean, Dustin, maybe it's tennis, right? I mean, you were firing in-game tennis when you were over in Jersey. So, I mean, maybe it's tennis is the key here. It'll be the ATP app or something.
I mean, if I'm going to be up listening to earnings calls at 4:30 in the morning, I need to be betting on tennis at the same time. Sure.
Absolutely. So, guys, this was some really, really, really big news that I think came out of nowhere for us last night. Of course, this is a developing story. Dustin and Adam and Eric are going to continue to use all their sources and try to continue to add to this report. So please head over to legalsportsreport.com and click on this article, and I'm sure it will continually be updated as new information comes in. But really, really, really big deal, and something that I think that we are, as we kind of said here on this podcast, going to continue to see more of with these media networks as they already own these sports broadcasting rights. And that was the big bugaboo that we were talking about. That was the big thing that was in the way for some of these apps, is just the fact that they didn't have the rights to these certain leagues and certain big time sports and big time games. And these media companies certainly do. And that takes a step out of the equation there. So very interesting stuff here, guys. Thanks for the time this week. Of course, we are on iTunes. We are on Spotify. We are on Stitcher. You can find us on the Twitter machine at LSP Report. You can find Adam Candy at Adam Candy, no Y, 2 E's, at Dustin Galker, and at Eric_Ramsey. I am at Matt Brown M2. For Adam, for Eric, for Dustin, I am Matt. See you guys next week.